your mindset is nothing without the somatic capacity to maintain that mindset. Welcome to the Alive and Aligned podcast, a show dedicated to helping you live a life of truth and share your fullest gifts with the world. I'm your host, Pete Byrne, and I'm here to open your mind to new perspectives, to introduce you to some epic humans who are already out there living their deepest truth. So now just grounding in, taking a breath, letting go of anything you're still holding onto from today, and just opening up to receiving this episode now. Let's dive on in. Welcome to this solo episode of the Alive and Aligned podcast on why your mindset will not save you. I want to really explore today the dance between the mind and the body, and why our society's focus in general on the mind as the pathway to deeper understanding of humans is great and also kind of limited. Starting this off by first of all naming that I, up until not too long ago, was identifying myself as a mindset coach. As someone who studied psychology, as someone who grew up with, coaching in the environment, like in my household, as someone who saw, a way of, if we change someone's limiting beliefs and their thought patterns and do positive affirmations and meditation and all these mind-based practices is going to really change someone's life. And NLP, we rewrite the languaging, all of these things. Wow, amazing, and really seeing that there is benefit to that. There's a lot of gold that can come from those practices and, from working on those areas. And I've seen that. And at the same time, I realized that there's some big shortcomings in that sense. There's some limitations to focusing purely on the mind, and from a therapeutic perspective, just talk therapy and psychotherapy, and it's there was just something that wasn't landing for me with all of this. It's yes, and what else is there? What I started to realize is that even though the mindset of some people could be really positive and really strong, it wasn't always working. It seemed to work for some people, but not for others. And what I noticed was that you might have a group of people that turn up that all want to have a successful business. Maybe 50 people turn up, but how many actually go ahead and do it? And what is the reason why those people do it? Now we could say it's because they've got such a great mindset. And as a result of that, they work hard and they got a good work ethic and all these kind of things. But I want to beg to differ. I want to say the reason why a small percentage of people is not their mindset, but it's more because of a lack of deep embodied traumas or emotions or blocks that are stopping them from actually carrying out the desires of that mind. So here's the analogy we're going to dive into today. I want you to imagine the mind as a child, a young child, okay? And I want you to imagine the body as the parent, the adult, who is in charge. So this child, okay, the child can have dreams and hopes and desires and wishes and even a self-appointed sense of autonomy. It can say, what? Today I want to go to the park and then have an ice cream. That's what I want to do today. And that's all well and good, but ultimately it's the adult who's running the show. He's the one in charge. He's the one responsible. And even if the child has 100% of its sights set on going to the park and then having ice cream, if the adult doesn't want to do that, or it's not on the agenda, it's not going to happen. Sorry, little buddy, you're out of luck. So the child might want to do something, but for whatever reason, if the adult says no, it's game over. Occasionally, the child might overpower the adult. It might throw a huge tantrum and use a huge amount of effort. No, and screaming for hours, I want my ice cream. And maybe at that point then the adult might cave for a little bit. But ultimately it's not a good long-term strategy and the child's just going to be exhausted at the end of it. It's not sustainable. The other thing that might happen is the child might get really clever at working and buttering up the adult, and working around it. But at the end of the day, it's not actually able to control the adult. It can influence it, but it can't change, control it. And the adult still has that veto principle that can just say no at any time. So coming back to the mind and the body, okay? My mind might have big dreams and goals and desires and things I want to do. And I'm going to make a big, successful business and have a positive impact on the world. And then the body, who's the adult, goes, fucking, yeah, right, you are. Not on my watch. Not with all this stored shame and guilt and, anger and sadness that I'm harboring, and these beliefs of, if I go back to being in that disempowered state that you put me in when I was 7 years old, if I ever go back there, then I'll die. So we're not going to do that. We're going to close this down right now before it even gets off the ground. So even though my mind really wants to move forward, the body is saying no. And this is where, right, often we can have this feeling of like a split personality. Like half of us wants to eat the cake, half of us wants to go on a diet. What's going on? Well, it's because I would say the mind, and maybe even a part of the body, but usually it's like the mind saying, I'm going to do this routine. I have chosen to do this diet. And the body says, well, actually, right now I'm suppressing a lot of emotion. And as my capacity decreases over the course of the day, by the evening, I really need something to distract me from this emotion that's arising. Okay. And I'm going to become very uncomfortable until you give me something that's going to distract me from that, whether it's, alcohol or, sugar, social media, whatever it is. So this is where we start to see how the body is really the one running the show, and the mindset can be bulletproof, but at the end of the day, the body's the one controlling. So these ingrained behavior patterns and traumas and fears, incomplete reflexes, unexpressed emotions that the body can be holding. As soon as one of those is triggered, okay, in the body, we can be going around our day, doing our thing with our bulletproof mindset. Oh, I've got such a strong mindset. I'm going to be successful. And, then something happens. Something happens in our environment, which we have no control over, and triggers one of these deep wounds that we have in the body. A stored program from back when we were young, when we felt insignificant or unworthy or unloved or abandoned or one of these things. And it activates this state in our body. It reloads the program. We feel like we are back in that old version of ourselves. It's kind of like when you see people who are like really successful, in their lives, and then you see them in a relationship and they act like a fucking child. It's the exact same. It's a different program, a different version of themselves that gets activated when, let's say, love or intimacy is engaged and they start playing out their old parent patterns. Like, if it's with their male partner, it's like they're just projecting their daddy wounds onto it, basically, and operating from that younger version of self. So imagine this. We get one of these old wounds triggered into a fight or flight or freeze response, like we would have felt back in that old scenario. And we begin to, the body literally starts to shut down parts of the brain. So when we're triggered and when we're in this heightened state and you feel the adrenaline running and you're heated and you almost can't think straight, and you might be saying or doing things that later you might apologize for that you didn't mean, but in the moment that was real. You really felt that. What's happening is, right, your body, your blood chemistry is changing, your adrenal glands are firing, you're in a fight or flight response, okay? And what that's doing is it literally shuts down the prefrontal cortex. It shuts down that part of the brain that deals with logic and reasoning and empathy and compassion. And all those things like forward thinking, all these abilities that our super amazing neocortex human brain can do no longer becomes accessible. And we drop back into the animal brain. We go offline. So at that point, all we can do is work out of past patterning and conditioning. We can only go back to those pathways that we know, which on a very primitive level is fight, flight, freeze. It might be actually, if you've learned at an early age that sugar helps you to buffer big emotions, then even though you've got this mad mindset that you're going to, focus and you're going to go on this diet, actually when that center starts to shut down because of the trigger, all the body knows is we're going to go back to what we know, which is buffering this with sugar or alcohol or numbing or whatever it is, okay? So this is where the mindset doesn't mean shit till you look at the body. The child can say whatever it wants, but the adult is the one running the show. So what do we do about this? Regressing back into the survival state, okay? It's kind of difficult because, ultimately we want to actualize, we want to move forward in our lives. We don't want to be, reacting to life. We don't want to be driven by these unconscious drives and desires and then shaming ourselves even more and kicking ourselves and just going down on spirals. So what are you going to do when you've regressed back into survival and your, rational mind has gone offline? It is possible sometimes to override it, like I said, with the child throwing a tantrum. You can sometimes push through, but it's not sustainable. It's a steep fight up that hill to overcome the body consistently. And what we want to do is we want to actually find the path of least resistance, okay? Your mindset is nothing. without the somatic capacity to maintain that mindset. There's no point in having this ironclad mindset if every time you drop into trigger, your prefrontal cortex just goes offline and you're only acting from old program anyway. What about working on your body's ability to hold that trigger and to be in that state, in that heightened state, but remain online in all centers so we can be reasonable and, compassionate and logic thinking, all of these amazing human qualities that we have can remain online. The ideal strategy is to not fight the body with your ironclad mindset, but to get the adult back online with the child, to get them working together, to get the body and the mind in this symbiosis, in harmony, dancing together. It's much less effort than trying to fight against the body, and trying to do even more positive affirmations to overcome these deep ingrained survival responses. So now that you kind of have a sense of why there might be this internal split and why the body might be fighting because of these old incomplete parts that just want to, find completion, we get to take the slightly tougher route potentially, but overall in the long run, the easier route, and doing the deep work to let go and integrate these parts, to rewire these old patterns and to regulate our nervous system so that we can be with trigger. We can have stuff happen to us, inevitably, as it will do in life. And instead of regressing back into these old patterns and losing our mindset, we can actually stay integrated with the two parts, and we can have our mind do the goal setting and the thinking, and we can have the body on board, working with it and driving together towards our goal and what we want to achieve in life. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to continuing to, for me, integrate the two sides, the mind, the body, and hoping also that this insight is going to allow more of these two powerhouses to come together and work in symbiosis in your life too. I hope that this analogy has brought you some clarity, has allowed you to understand your potential inner conflict a little better, and to start to think about how you can allow these two powerhouses to come together and work on the same team, driving you full force towards your goals in life. Thank you.